So you're walking to your car after a, perfectly normal coffee date with a colleague. The sun is shining, the coffee was good, the interaction felt fine. But then suddenly, your brain decides to play back a single sentence you said like 5 minutes
Oh,
ago.
yeah, the dreaded replay loop.
Right. You just replay it, you start analyzing the other person's facial expression. Like, did they flinch? Was that weird? Wait, did I use the wrong verb tense there? Did I say way too much?
And then the physical reaction hits.
Exactly. Within seconds, your heart rate spikes, your chest gets tight, and this totally casual chat has morphed into an absolute crisis.
Yeah, I mean, it's just this universally recognizable human experience, right?
Yeah.
Psychologists actually call it the post-conversation autopsy. You're like retroactively dissecting every single syllable, searching for a mistake that honestly probably doesn't even exist.
But for anyone navigating the world in a second language, specifically English, this isn't just your standard social anxiety. It's an entirely different level of mental gymnastics.
Oh, absolutely. It's what we call double overthinking. Because you aren't just overthinking the social dynamic, right? You are scrutinizing the mechanics of the language itself. You're managing two massive cognitive loads at the exact same time.
Which has to be incredibly exhausting.
It's totally draining. When you're operating in a non-native language, your brain is essentially running this background program that never shuts off. It's constantly monitoring grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation.
Cultural nuance, too.
Exactly, all while trying to just, engage in an authentic human connection.
Hmm.
And when anxiety enters that system, it creates this vicious feedback loop. The social anxiety triggers language insecurity, which then just completely worsens the social anxiety.
So the goal of our deep dive today is to build a sort of circuit breaker for that loop. We're going to unpack the exact English vocabulary, the idioms, and the conversational tactics that native speakers use to describe, process, and ultimately halt these anxious mental cycles.
Yeah, because if we can equip you with the exact words to identify what your brain is doing, you can actually start to dismantle that panic.
Right, and this is based on an actual psychological mechanism, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It relies on a well-documented concept called affect labeling. The whole idea is that before you can stop an emotional reaction, you have to name it.
Like putting a tag on it.
Exactly. Brain imaging studies literally show that when a person experiences raw anxiety, the amygdala, which is, the brain's threat detection center, it just lights up. But the second you assign a specific, accurate word to that feeling, the blood flow actually shifts. It moves away from the amygdala and goes straight to the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic and language.
Wow, so just the act of finding the word forces your brain to physically cool down.
It does. You transition from just experiencing the emotion to observing it. You're separating your identity from this temporary feeling.
That makes so much sense. So let's apply that to the specific vocabulary native English speakers use. Everyday phrases, like being in my head.
Oh, that's a classic one. Being in your head describes that state where you are just completely detached from your physical surroundings because you're entirely trapped in an internal monologue.
Right, you're physically there, but mentally you're miles away. And then there's second-guessing yourself, which is that agonizing, retrospective doubt about a choice you've already made.
Yeah, the classic what-ifs. Like, what if I just said it this way instead? But the terms that really illustrate the mechanics of anxiety are spiraling and ruminating.
Those two are everywhere right now. And when I look at how they function in everyday English, I keep coming back to a mechanical analogy because spiraling feels incredibly visceral to me.
How so?
Well, it feels like falling down a flight of stairs. It's fast, it's kinetic, it's totally out of control, and it escalates with every single bounce. You make one tiny mistake, and immediately the brain leaps to the worst possible outcome.
Oh, totally. Like, I used the wrong word in that meeting, so my boss thinks I'm incompetent.
Right. And now I'm going to get fired. I won't be able to pay rent. I'll end up living in my car. It goes from 0 to 100 in 3 seconds.
That rapid escalation is the defining trait of a spiral. And that specific jump from a minor missteps, like using the wrong word, straight to sudden homelessness, that's a cognitive distortion called catastrophizing.
Catastrophizing, that's a great word.
Yeah, it's when the brain just completely bypasses all intermediate logic. It ignores all probability and lands squarely on an apocalyptic scenario. It's basically an evolutionary survival mechanism, preparing for the absolute worst.
Yeah.
It's just misfiring in a modern social context.
So if spiraling is falling down the stairs, ruminating feels entirely different to me. I'd say ruminating isn't an escalation. It's like being stuck on a broken escalator.
Oh, I like that.
Right, you're just stuck on a single step, grinding away, going absolutely nowhere. It's very passive and repetitive. You're continually circling the same negative memory, like agonizing over an awkward joke you made like 3 years ago.
That is a perfect distinction. Rumination is static, while spiraling is dynamic. And while affect labeling, internally saying, okay, I am catastrophizing right now, is a super powerful tool, the prefrontal cortex can't always win that battle completely on its own.
Sometimes the internal circuit breaker just fails.
Exactly. And when it does, we have to look for external anchors.
Which brings us to the actual phrases friends use to pull each other out of these loops, the language of gentle grounding. When someone is clearly lost in a spiral, a really common conversational intervention in English is, hey, come back to Earth.
Yeah, it's a spatial metaphor, right? It acknowledges that the anxious person's mind is currently floating out in some imaginary hypothetical future. So it's this very gentle, non-threatening invitation to just return to the physical present.
And following that, friends will usually deploy a tactic to extract actual data from the panic. They'll say something like, walk me through it. What's actually worrying you? And the word actually is doing a tremendous amount of work in that sentence.
It really is. It draws a firm boundary between the imagined threat and the literal facts. From a psychological standpoint, this whole strategy is about validating the person without validating the distortion.
So give me an example of how that boundary works in practice.
Well, if you are spiraling, a friend shouldn't just say, oh, you're fine, don't worry about it.
Because that feels super dismissive.
Right, it tells the person their biological response is wrong. Instead, you'll hear supportive phrases like, that makes total sense why you're stressed. Or simply, I hear you. You validate the physiological reality of their stress, but then you immediately follow it with a reality check.
Like, but what's the worst that could realistically happen here?
Exactly. You force the anxious brain to actually define the parameters of the threat.
I do want to challenge one specific phrase that comes up all the time in these scenarios, though. Because when someone reaches out for a reality check, they almost always start by asking, am I being crazy here?
Yes, very common.
And I get that crazy in casual English just means irrational in this context. But doesn't saying that out loud reinforce the anxiety? I mean, you are verbally admitting that you've sort of lost your grip on reality.
I can totally see why it looks that way on the surface.
Yeah.
But in the context of close relationships, asking, am I being crazy, is actually a mechanism of profound self-awareness.
Really? How so?
When you're deep in a spiral, your internal compass is just spinning frantically. So asking that question is a vulnerable concession. It basically means, hey, I recognize my internal logic might be compromised right now, and I'm recruiting your functioning prefrontal cortex to help me recalibrate.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's actually, let's play this out. Let's do a mini role play so people can hear how this recalibration sounds naturally.
Oh, great idea. Okay, I'll be the one spiraling. Let's say I'm an English learner, and we are coworkers. So I just sent an email to our manager with an attachment, and I wrote, please look over this. And now, like 5 minutes later, I'm totally spiraling. I'm convinced that look over this sounded like an arrogant command rather than a polite request.
Okay, I'm ready.
So I message you, and I'm just frantic. I say, am I being crazy? Was that way too aggressive? They can think I'm so demanding.
Okay, hey, come back to Earth for a second. Let's get a quick reality check. Walk me through it. What's actually worrying you?
Well, I use a direct verb instead of a conditional, and I sounded so unprofessional. What if they think I'm trying to boss them around?
Okay, I hear you. That makes total sense why you'd overthink that phrasing. But let's look at the facts. Does our manager usually care about super formal language in quick emails?
Well, no, not usually.
Right. And did you include the actual data they asked for?
Yeah, it was all attached.
Okay, so what is the worst that could actually happen? Like, realistically, have they ever gotten upset at a brief email before?
No. I mean, they usually just reply with a thumbs up emoji.
Exactly. You've handled way harder communications than this. You're totally fine.
And seen. That was perfect. See how mathematical that is?
Yeah, I'm literally stripping away the emotional projection and forcing you to look at the historical data of our relationship with the manager.
Right, you're providing the scaffolding so that I can reach the logical conclusion myself, rather than just telling me to calm down.
But, we don't always have a friend on standby. Sometimes it's 2:0 a.m., you're staring at the ceiling, and your brain just decides it's the perfect time to review every single grammatical error you made that week.
Oh, the 2:0 a.m. grammar review, the worst.
It's brutal. So how do we internalize that reality check when we are completely alone?
Well, this relies heavily on internal self-talk,
Hmm.
and the English language actually has a really deep reservoir of idioms explicitly designed for personal self-soothing. A lot of them function by basically manipulating our perception of time.
Right, because anxiety makes the present moment feel permanent and just all-consuming. So we use phrases like one thing at a time. Or we stretch the timeline out with questions like, in a year, will this actually matter?
Exactly, or this will look entirely different in a week.
But there are two specific idioms here that I think reveal so much about the cultural mindset behind the language. The first one is, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it.
Yes, which is a commitment to dealing with problems only when they physically materialize, not when they're just, theoretical possibilities.
But the second one is my absolute favorite. Don't borrow trouble.
It's such a good one.
It's a staggering financial metaphor for anxiety. When you are lost in the what ifs, you are literally taking out a high interest loan on stress that doesn't even exist yet. You're choosing to pay emotional interest today on a catastrophe that might not even happen tomorrow.
It's so true.
But why do we frame emotional regulation as a banking transaction?
I think it speaks to a really deep current of pragmatism in English idiomatic history. Think about it. We constantly talk about spending time, wasting energy, and paying attention.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we really do.
So don't borrow trouble treats emotional bandwidth as a finite, measurable resource. It's a highly utilitarian way of managing the mind. It basically argues that going into emotional debt for a hypothetical scenario isn't just painful. It's incredibly inefficient. It's just bad accounting.
Worry is bad accounting. I'm literally writing that down right now. That is brilliant.
A great way to reframe it.
Now, beyond those traditional idioms, the everyday vocabulary of anxiety has shifted massively in recent years, hasn't it? We've sort of absorbed clinical and mindfulness terminology directly into casual slang.
We definitely have. The language of grounding has become totally ubiquitous. People constantly talk about needing to ground themselves or wanting to feel grounded.
Which means pulling your awareness out of the hypothetical future and rooting it right in the physical present.
Exactly.
You hear phrases all the time like be present or let it go or simply breathe. But I have a real issue with how these are sometimes used in conversation.
Oh, tell me.
Well, if I'm in the middle of a catastrophic spiral, my chest is tight, I'm panicking, and someone just looks at me and calmly says, just breathe or let it go. It does not ground me. It infuriates me.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
feels incredibly condescending, right?
And it should feel that way. You're identifying the real danger of what we could call weaponized mindfulness.
Hmm.
When those phrases are directed at someone who is highly activated, they operate as commands. They implicitly communicate, hey, your reaction is an inconvenience to me, turn it off.
Yes. It completely invalidates the physiological reality of what I'm experiencing.
Exactly. So their actual power lies in internal repetition, not external command. They're meant to be private affirmations.
Okay. That's a huge difference.
It really is.
Yeah.
When your heart rate is spiking over a tiny mistake you made in a meeting, privately repeating something like, this too shall pass, serves as an anchor. It reminds your own nervous system of impermanence. No panic attack lasts forever. The feeling is temporary. It's an entirely different thing to offer that comfort to yourself than to have someone else demand it of you.
That perfectly brings us to the core challenge for anyone listening who operates in English as a second or third language. Because all of this vocabulary, the grounding techniques, the reality checks, the affirmations, it's doubly critical.
Because the language itself is frequently the source of the spiral.
Exactly. The fear of sounding foolish, of using the wrong preposition, of pausing just a second too long to find a word.
This is where we really have to examine the massive difference between the learner's perception and the native speaker's reality. When you're learning a language, you're trained to view it as a strict series of rules.
Like a math equation to be solved.
Right. If you plug in the exact right verb tense, you get the correct output. So when you make a mistake, you view it as a complete failure of the equation.
You think, oh no, I said make a mistake instead of do a mistake. The whole sentence is ruined, and this person thinks I'm totally uneducated.
But the reality of linguistic processing is entirely different. Native speakers in natural conversation are almost entirely blind to grammatical errors.
I really want to underscore this because it runs counter to every single anxiety a language learner has. Native speakers do not notice.
They honestly don't.
Mm-hmm.
The human brain is a meaning-making machine. It is not grammar-checking software. When a native speaker is listening to you, they're scanning for intent, for warmth, for eye contact, and emotional resonance. If the core message is clear, Their brain automatically bridges any little grammatical gaps without even consciously registering them.
Let's frame this with an analogy because I think this is so important. Speaking a second language with a native speaker is basically like driving a car on a road trip.
Okay, I'm with you.
Your friend is sitting in the passenger seat, they're looking out the window, enjoying the beautiful mountains, listening to the music, and just enjoying the conversation you're having. The scenery is the human connection, right? It's the message you're sharing. But you, as the driver, you are absolutely terrified. You are staring intently at your own hands, making absolutely sure they are clamped at the perfect 10 and 2 position on the steering wheel.
And ironically, staring at your hands makes you a significantly worse driver.
Exactly. You're rigid, you're swerving, you aren't even looking at the road. And your friend in the passenger seat does not care about your hand placement at all. They just want to enjoy the ride with you. So why is it so incredibly difficult for a language learner to just take their eyes off the steering wheel?
In linguistics, there's a concept called the affective filter. It basically hypothesizes that negative emotions like fear, anxiety, and self-doubt create a literal cognitive wall. When your affective filter is high, like when you're terrified of making a mistake, it blocks your ability to access the language you actually already know.
Oh, wow. So you literally forget words.
Yeah, you forget words, your pronunciation degrades, your fluency just halts.
So the hyperfixation on perfection is what actually causes the mistakes.
Precisely. By forcing yourself to look up at the scenery, to
Yeah.
focus entirely on the warmth and the connection rather than the mechanics, you lower that affective filter. Your nervous system relaxes, and the language flows so much more naturally. The goal of communication is not flawless execution. The goal is connection.
To aid in that shift, there are a few practical affirmations we can adopt, right? Internal self-talk designed specifically to lower that affective filter.
Definitely. Phrases like, good enough is enough, or I said what I meant. And honestly, the most important one, they understood me, and that is what matters.
If a learner can truly internalize the phrase, they understood me, the entire paradigm of speaking a foreign language shifts. It completely dismantles that broken escalator of rumination we talked about earlier.
Because the criteria for success has fundamentally changed. You aren't grading yourself on a strict rubric of perfect syntax anymore. You're simply evaluating whether or not a human connection occurred.
And once you define success as connection, those little grammatical missteps totally lose their power to trigger a spiral.
They really do.
Well, we've mapped out a pretty comprehensive psychological toolkit today, but before we go, let's just recap those core vocabulary words real quick so they stick.
Good idea.
Yeah.
We covered the spiral, which is that fast, out-of-control escalation of anxiety. We talked about catastrophizing, jumping straight to the worst-case scenario.
We practiced doing a reality check to look at the actual facts with a friend. We discussed being grounded, which is staying rooted in the present.
Yeah.
And we looked at using private affirmations to lower that affective filter.
And, crucially, we addressed the cognitive load of the language learner, reinforcing that native speakers really do prioritize the scenery over the mechanics of the steering wheel.
It is such a profound shift in perspective. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to explore on your own. We've spent this entire time dissecting the English vocabulary for anxiety and grounding. But consider your own native language. Think about the specific phrase, the idiom, or even just a single word you instinctively use to calm yourself down when you start to spiral.
Because every culture has its own linguistic mechanism for cutting through the panic, right? Its own version of coming back to earth.
Exactly. I want you to identify what that phrase is for you. But here's the challenge. Do not try to translate the literal words into English. Literal translations often strip away the power. Instead, challenge yourself to translate the feeling.
Focus on the emotional weight, the history, and the specific comfort that phrase brings you in your mother tongue.
Yes. The next time you find yourself ruminating over a conversation, bring that feeling into your English self-talk. In fact, what phrase do you use to calm yourself down? Share it in the comments because someone else reading them probably needs to hear exactly what you have to say today. If you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss next week's deep dive. We'll see you next time.